October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's certainly a hot topic that everybody hears about in the news quite frequently. A lot of business and transactions take place every single day online. A few companies that have, you've probably heard of cyber breaches and ransomware, things of that nature. Equifax, Target, the city of Atlanta, eBay. But I'm sitting here with Bryan. He's the owner of Valortech, and one of the things that we're going to talk about today is cybersecurity. He's an Army veteran, and he owns a company called Valortech. It's an IT company that helps businesses increase productivity, profits, and protect them from different cyber threats. Thanks for having us here today, Bryan.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and how'd you get into IT?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a small town called Fredonia, Wisconsin, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Can honestly say I didn't really grow up doing too much in computers per se, but my dad was an electrical engineer, in addition to being a farmer, a hobby farmer, and just kind of picking it up, from him over kind of through osmosis, if you will. He got me started out soldering circuit boards for $1 a board for a product that he manufactured in the basement of our home. And I was doing that when I was about 5, 6 years old, and I kind of got my feet wet that way into electronics. I sadly lost my dad about 15 years ago, and kind of from that moment I decided that I wanted to go into computers. And I kind of started my journey from that perspective. It just kind of grew from there.
Your dad was kind of an inspiration to get into the field?
Oh, absolutely. He, he kind of helped keep me both grounded in reality and understand what tech is and where tech is going in life. It was a very unique upbringing, one that you don't see very often, but kind of give you a little bit of background with him. I mean, yes, he worked in tech. He had to, raised us on a hobby farm. But in addition to that, he was also trained as a tool and die maker. So I just got the full exposure to all sorts of different, all sorts of different areas in life that kind of helped mold me to where I am today.
So with all that being said, what inspired you to join the military?
Well, I need a way to pay for college. Plus, I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to serve my country. My dad did a lot with the community. I got to see how that impacted him and our family, and I wanted to do more. And I thought the military was a great way of doing that. I originally wanted to join the Marines. That did not work out, so I ended up joining the Army. Spent a couple years active duty, then finished out my career at the National Guard, and I've been out since 2010.
Well, thank you for your service.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it. So, switching over to the hot topic of the month here, cybersecurity. What sort of threats, if I'm a consumer versus a business, what sort of threats should I be aware of that should be concerning for me, just even at home using a computer or looking at stuff on the internet or using email at work?
Sure. Well, I mean, cyber threats come in all sorts of different ways. They come in through browsing. They come in through phishing emails, spam, standard computer viruses. I mean, they come in all sorts of different shapes and forms. The best, things you need to watch out for are websites that look very similar to a website. Any email that says, hey, your passwords needs to be reset or something to that effect. A lot of these criminals out there, these cyber criminals, will use scare tactics to get you to click a link and to enter your information. And a lot of times to the uneducated user, they can look very real. And that's usually one of the bigger ways that your information gets leaked, and that starts the whole downward spiral of getting your identity stolen, money taken out of your banks, credit cards opened up in your name that you didn't authorize, things along those lines.
So if I'm a small business out there and I use the internet a little bit. I might use it for some cloud-based software or something like that. Am I just as much at risk as like a large corporation, or is my threat level a little bit lower than what theirs is going to be?
I would say you're probably at greater risk for a couple different reasons. One, cyber criminals know that you don't have the big budgets that a lot of these bigger corporations do. You're probably going to lack on updating your infrastructure. You're not going to be as worried about password change policies and just how you operate as a business. And those can lend themselves to opening up doorways for criminals to find a way into your infrastructure. Especially now with everybody wanting to be on the cloud. I mean, the cloud is really nothing more than just someone else's computer. And that also means that your information is dispersed amongst many different platforms, and that can lend itself to companies having different security policies and practices, and different things that they'll offer in terms of remediation, and that could further open the door to being hacked,
Sure.
if you will.
So if I'm a contractor versus like somebody who owns a retail store, what kind of threat difference is there between the two? If I'm like a building contractor versus, let's say I own a chain of franchises, what's the difference in threats that you typically see with the two industries?
Well, every industry has its own unique set of challenges, right? If you're in banking and do a lot of financial transactions, you're worried about things like PCI compliance and some of the other financial regulatory compliances that are out there. If you're in the construction zone, construction area, you're probably going to start worrying about a lot of the IoT that you have out there, so Internet of Things, so smart connected devices, smart connected tools now. I mean, everything is becoming connected. You're going to be worried about losing data if you drop your phone, and anything like that can kind of constitute a problem for you. So it really kind of depends on the vertical that you're sitting in, but they all come with their own unique set of challenges.
Sure.
So it comes down to what is your biggest risk.
What are some ways people can protect themselves from these sort of threats? Business versus personal.
Sure. Well, let's just start with the personal. A lot of personals come. Our finances are all over the place these days, right? You have a 401k here, bank account here. You might have multiple bank accounts at different banks, and really the best way of protecting yourself and your family is to get a service out there that watches your credit. In addition to just behavioral changes of what you do day to day. Don't give out your password. Change your passwords frequently. Don't use the same password on multiple logins. Little behaviorisms like that can go a long way to decreasing the likelihood that you're going to be targeted. Regardless of if you're a business or in personal, I don't believe that that this issue is going to go away. I think it's only going to get worse. And really, it's up to the individual user to figure out just how safe they want themselves to be. And it really comes down to being educated. On the business front, once again, it kind of depends on where you are, but let's just talk about small businesses because that's really where I focus on. Because they have a tendency to be, generally targeted more often, because all the reasons I mentioned before, it's really coming down to, once again, behaviorism, behavioral type of postures, password policies, ensuring that you know where your data is and where it sits and have proper backups of that, and then having systems in place to help protect your systems from the world at large. Especially if you're in businesses, we're all struggling in this economy with personnel and hiring the proper people. And that generally means that a lot of these smaller companies don't focus on the IT side of it. So that's where companies like I come into play, where I can come in and I can help fill those voids. And it's always good to have a third party's opinions on where you sit from a cybersecurity landscape perspective, how you can protect yourself, your interests, your business. It comes down to insurance as well. I mean, making sure that you have proper insurances in place to make sure that if you are breached, that your business isn't interrupted for, you can recoup some of that loss in revenue. Little things like that. Once again, it comes down to really where you want to be, how much you want to spend on it, and what your risk tolerance is.
How do I know if I'm being targeted? I mean, there's so many different things that happen on a daily basis. We simply go on our computer to check a bank account, or we send an email off to a family member or something like that when we get home, and we leave the computer screen on, and they're talking about the camera coming on, and you don't know it.
Sure.
And these guys are watching you and watching your every move.
Sure.
How do we know if that's happening?
Well, there's different ways of identifying that. I kind of go off the golden rule of just assume that you're being watched, and just assume that your information has been leaked, despite all of your best efforts for it not to be. Going under that assumption, you can kind of, think about, what you need to do to protect yourself. So, if you see odd behaviors of a computer, of all of a sudden your camera lights are on and stuff like that, I mean, that's all kind of obvious stuff. But really, the best way of knowing that you're actively being targeted is to have a product like, these products that, services that are credit monitoring and also now include the deep and dark web.
Sure.
On as well. If you have these types of services, that goes a long way to kind of identifying that you're an active target, or someone has targeted you already. Things along those lines.
For the personal side, there's a lot of different services out there. I can name one off my head, LifeLock.
Yep.
They're one that could protect your personal identity, correct?
Correct.
As far as business, if I'm a small business, I know larger companies have their own IT teams and things of that nature, or they outsource it to guys like yourself. But what if I'm just a small company, and I'm just getting up and going? I might be, a young entrepreneur or whatever, but the threat's still there. How do I protect myself, if I don't have the budget for it or something?
Well, you can give companies like us a call, and we can help you put in the right policies in place to minimize that risk. And as you grow, we can grow with you, and through that relationship, we can help you put the right process and procedures, extend those processes and procedures out, and then add in those additional services to ensure that you aren't being targeted, ensure that you aren't breached. Put in the appropriate levels of security to make sure that your information stays your information.
Sure. I mean, I remember when we spoke last week, and you were sharing some things with me about the dark web and all these things that are going on behind the scenes that us as regular consumers and businesses don't see.
Right.
But this is where the hackers are hanging out. I mean, that stuff kind of scared me a little bit. So where do you see this cyber attack, these cyber threats, and cybersecurity 5-10 years from now?
Well, I think as devices keep getting connected, more and more connected, smart devices. I mean, your coffee pot these days can be on your wireless, your home Wi-Fi. I mean, it's the things that are becoming smart or connected is just expanding rapidly. So I only see that growing, but I see different attack vectors that cyber criminals are going to start using. They're going to start going after more soft targets, I think. Right now, I think the bigger targets at the moment are manufacturing, because I think they're kind of a soft target right now, especially with more and more connected manufacturing lines. And in long term, I mean, as we get more into electric vehicles and more smart vehicles, they're going to become more and more connected. They're going to lend themselves to being attacked and by cyber criminals. I mean, the world's a cyber criminal's oyster right now. I mean, everything's becoming connected, and unfortunately, only recently do I think we're starting to take a much more serious approach to security before we take or send a product out to the market. I think historically that's always kind of been an afterthought, and security's always had to play catch up to the technology. But I think now we're slowly turning the tides on that, and I think manufacturers are picking up that security needs to be probably on the forefront of of a product before it goes out to market.
Sure.
So I see as more and more connected devices come online over the next couple of years, I think that's really where things are going to start shifting. And when it comes to security, it's a cat and mouse game. It really is.
Mm-hmm. So I know we hear a lot about computers and viruses and things of that nature, but you don't really hear too much of that about mobile devices.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a concern with mobile devices? If using a bank app on your phone or something like that, is there a security issue there? Like if you're using someone else's Wi-Fi or something, you're at the airport or whatever.
Free Wi-Fi, especially at a lot of coffee shops and whatnot, it's not always free, right? There's always a catch somewhere somehow. The big thing is if you're going to use wireless in any way, shape, or form, or even just being on the internet, always make sure that the communication's secure. So you're looking for things like HTTPS in front of the URL. You're looking for policies and procedures that are put into place to ensure your information is secure. Using VPN technology to help secure point-to-point or endpoint-to-endpoint communications. Those will help you keep your information secure. Kind of going back to what I originally said, always assume that you're being targeted. So especially on mobile devices now, you can use a VPN on a mobile device to keep your information secure. There's all sorts of different ways you can ensure that your information is safe. Really, once again, it comes down to making sure your behaviors lend themselves to being at least having some kind of a security posture. So making sure your phone auto locks, make sure it has a passcode, making sure that you're not rooting or jailbreaking your phone, depending on what device you have. Things along those lines go a long way to, once again, ensuring, or at least adding to a level of confidence that your information isn't being stolen.
Sure.
So,
do you see the mobile devices being more of an issue down the road as
well?
Yeah,
I think that landscape is still developing. I mean, like anything else, I think the landscape is always changing. But yes, I do think as more and more devices, as we're on our phones more and more now, I think that's going to become a bigger problem. I think it already is a problem. I just don't think it gets the time of day like some of these bigger breaches, banks and other manufacturers and other banks and facilities and companies like that out there. So.
Sure. What are some things that that people might not know about cybersecurity that they should know, and some things that they might not know about you yourself or
Sure.
your company? I'd like them to hear a little bit more about you and your company and some of the things that you're able to help them with, Sure. and protect them from these sort of threats.
Absolutely. One of the things that we are specializing in heavily is working with other businesses that do work with government agencies. So if you do DoD work, you fall underneath a new certification that came online in December of last year called NIST A100-171. There's PCI, there's NIST Handbook. There's a whole slew of different certifications out there that spread across the banking industry to companies doing business with the government and so on and so forth. And we really do focus on those businesses to help them bring them within compliance, help them put in the processes and procedures needed to pass certifications, to help lower their threat risk, help them with insurance as well. That's really where we focus our efforts on. we do obviously do the managed services perspective, so we can take care of your help desk and manage your infrastructure, provide you with an infrastructure as a service. We can obviously do all of that, and we do like to layer on the security components around that as well. Even if you don't fall underneath any kind of compliances, we do like to at least give every one of our customers a cybersecurity overview to see where there are holes and where we can improve upon. And then we want to work with you to ensure that we can close those gaps.
Sure. So we're both kind of tied into the veteran community
Yep.
here in Milwaukee pretty deep, I'd say.
Yes, definitely.
And I know that you have a program to help veteran-owned businesses. Do you want
Yes.
to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So if you are a veteran-owned business and you are doing any kind of government work, we are, and even if you're part of the chamber, we offer anybody part of the chamber, anybody who does government work, a free cybersecurity assessment, carte blanche with a full-blown document on our recommendations. And we do that free of charge. It doesn't matter if you're big or small. We want to ensure that fellow veteran-owned businesses can be elevated to a point where we can compete with those bigger companies out there. And I think one way we can do that is to ensure that we're not being taken down by an oversight in your IT or security security habits.
Sure.
So yes.
Love that. Taking care of our brothers and sisters out there.
Amen to
it's
that.
just another line of defense that every business and person can use in their
Absolutely.
life. So what are some ways that people can find you, whether it's LinkedIn, website, whatever? Why don't you give them a
Sure.
overview?
Not a problem. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's my first name, last name. Our Valor Technologies is on LinkedIn as well. You can find us on Facebook, and I'm not real big on the Twitter, but you can find us on Twitter. More importantly, you can go. Our new website will be launching here very soon. It's just simply www.valortech. That's tech.io.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you.
You as well.
As always. And thank you guys for tuning in to VetBiz TV, and we'll see you in the next episode. This episode of VetBiz TV is brought to you by the Star Group, Insurance and Risk Solutions, serving and protecting veteran-owned businesses. The Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Our mission is your success.